Hi everyone! Today I am going to show you how to make these beautiful sesame tahini buns made with a lovely brioche dough. On your recipe you also have information on how to make them with cinnamon filling or with a chocolate filling, and when they come out they will look beautiful inside like that. So let's get started. So to start with, we have in here our flour, salt and sugar. I have my eggs mixed with my milk, my yeast, my butter ready, and a little bit of extra flour. So I'm going to tip this onto the bench because that is how I like to make my dough, and make a big well in the center. You can do this in a bowl or you can do it with a stand mixer. I'm going to tip in my eggs and my milk and then add in the yeast. The yeast we're using is instant active dry yeast. It's the one that comes in the little sachets from Edmonds, or in a big quantity. You can get it from Wilson's in the Bakels brand. If you don't use the instant active yeast, you can use just the normal dry yeast that comes in the little like pearls. With those ones, you just need to dissolve them in a bit of warm milk first, because it's got a bit of a shell on the outside that helps to keep the yeast fresh. So I'm just mixing in the flour a little bit at a time. Like I said, you can do this in a stand mixer with a hook attachment. I like to do it by hand, especially when you're first learning, or if it's the first time you've made a dough, especially a brioche. It's very sticky and it's really important to learn how the dough feels, as that affects the outcome quite significantly. So I do not have my trusty plastic scraper. I have left it at work, but here I have a plastic lid that I have cut. I'm just going to use it to scrape my dough together at this point. Just move that out of the way. So, brioche dough is a super enriched dough. That means it's got eggs, it's got milk, it's got butter, it's got things that make yeast slower to rise, but makes the dough super soft and delicious. With this brioche dough, it's really good because even though it's quite sticky, it's not so sticky that you can't work with it. Some brioche doughs are very, very soft and you need to rest them in the fridge overnight to make them workable. This one I find that you can use the same day without resting in the fridge, although it is always easier if you keep it in the fridge. So now that I've got a nice ball or nice dough, I'm going to add in my butter. Because I'm doing this by hand, what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my butter and just smush it a little bit to kind of soften it. I don't have a microwave here and it's not warm enough for it to actually be soft. If you do have a microwave, just put it in the microwave till it's soft. And just do a little bit at a time and then add in a bit more. We're using salted butter. I pretty much always use salted butter. The brand that I use is West Gold, but you can use any brand you like. And then just continue kneading. You want to really mix all that butter in. Like I said, this brioche dough isn't as sticky. It does have a fair amount of butter in it, but not too much. Once you've mastered this, if you want to move on to other more buttery brioche doughs, go for it. This is a really good kind of brioche introduction. So it is quite sticky still, but I'm just going to work in the rest of that flour. I like to knead it by just pushing it and folding it over on itself. A lot of brioche doughs also use egg yolks. The reason I don't do this for this one is just because I feel like we've put in 3 eggs, so you would need to put in 6 egg yolks, and I never have a use for all the leftover whites. But if you want to get a super rich brioche, go for it. So keep mixing, and then at this stage it's going to start to feel quite sticky, and I've used up all of my flour on the bench. Don't add any more flour unless you really need to. I'm going to scrape up everything that's left on there with my scraper to help get it in the bowl. And then I'm going to start doing the slap and fold technique. So I'm going to get everything off my hands. So what you do is you take your dough by one end, slap it down and fold it over. So that makes the camera wobble a little bit. This is basically doing by hand what a dough hook does. It literally just slaps your dough around in the bowl. Oh, that was quite loud. And you can see my dough is super sticky. It already has quite nice gluten development because it's really elastic. But what I want is just to help emulsify that butter a bit more, because brioche dough is a type of emulsification. And so at the moment, you will see my dough looks not like grainy, but it's not super smooth. So I want to keep doing this until it gets a really beautiful like sheen to it. Good way to let down any lockdown anger you have. And you can see it's really sticky still, and that's fine. You want to really avoid putting more flour in, as it will, sorry, I forgot the words. It will stop it from being as light and fluffy. The softer your dough is, the fluffier your final product will be. If you find that you're losing a lot on your bench, just take your plastic scraper, scrape it up, stick it back on, and it will stick a bit less, as it tends to stick to itself more than anything. So you can see here, I've got a bit of my hands. If I touch it, it sticks. The hand without much dough, like that, doesn't stick as badly. So just as often as you need, scrape it up. And I can see it's starting to become more smooth and more elastic. Once this is done, I'm going to leave it on the bench to prove. Will take, depending on the temperature, about an hour or 2. And then if you want to, you can leave it in the fridge overnight, which will make it easier to work with, but is not necessary. So I'll do mine today rather than leaving it in the fridge, so you can see how it acts. And yeah, we are almost there. You can see on the top there, getting super smooth. There's still a tiny bit of kind of texture to it. So I'm going to do this for another minute or so. For this, we're using high grade flour, which has a nice high gluten content, which means that our dough will go nice and stretchy like this. If you were to use low grade flour, it's just going to take a little bit more mixing to get it to this stage. but I'm pretty happy with this now. It's nice and smooth on the top. When I slap it, it comes together in a ball. Gonna scrape off any excess. And just bring it into a ball. And then I'll just show you up close, see how beautiful and stretchy that is. That's what you want. With brioche dough, you don't want to get it too hot, so just be aware if your hands are quite warm. You can, if you haven't got it kneaded enough, but it needs a bit more time, just leave it to rest if you're starting to feel the butter melt inside the dough. So then I'm just going to take a little bowl, dust it with some flour, use my scraper, pop my little dough baby in. You can cover it with a damp towel or with cling film. I prefer cling film because it stops it from getting a skin on the surface, but you do whatever you want, whatever suits you. If I can get it. So just push it straight on there. And now I'm going to leave this in a warm place for a little bit. You don't want anywhere too warm. If your yeast goes over 45 degrees, it's going to die. So you can put it in the sun, just make sure it doesn't get too hot, especially if it's in a metal bowl like mine. The ideal proving temperature is about 30 degrees or so, sometimes 35. If you have a proof setting on your oven or a warm setting, you can often use that. But yeah, we've all got heaps of time, so there's no rushes there. Alright, we'll see you in a little bit. Alright, so we are back with my beautiful brioche dough. You can see in the same bowl that it was in before, it has risen, doubled in size. It's super light and fluffy, so this has been about an hour just in my kitchen. And like I said, you could put it in the fridge overnight, but I'm going to use it straight away. You can see it's a little bit sticky, but not too bad. So what I'm going to do is put heaps of flour down. Can be quite generous. And then I'm going to tip my brioche dough out. Going to add some flour and kind of punch it down and shape it into a square or rectangle and push all that air out. Now I'm going to roll it into a nice big rectangle. Make sure you're constantly moving it around because it will stick. So what you want to do is move it around so you know if it's sticking or not. And you can stop it from sticking before you've rolled the whole thing out. Alright, so it's nice and big. You can't see all of it on the camera. It's about 2 millimeters thick, and I'm going to measure how much my rolling pin is and put that in the recipe description, but it is 1 rolling pin wide and tall, so I will put that in your recipe notes as to what that measurement actually is. I've got my tahini here, and starting with 2 tablespoons, and then if you've rolled it bigger you may need more. If you've rolled it smaller you will need less. I'm just going to use an offset palette knife. And I'm going to add another 2 tablespoons. You don't want it too thick because it's quite liquidy. So it will be hard to cut nicely if it's too thick. Oops. and you just want to gently spread it. Just going to add a bit more in the corners. So it's about 4 tablespoons all up. You will have enough in your boxes because I'm filming this before I weigh everything out. So nice and evenly spread. It's not quite at the edges, but that doesn't matter too much, and you'll see why in a second. Now I'm going to take my brown sugar, if I can get the lid open. Whoop. Sprinkle it roughly so it evenly coats everything. And then I'm going to use my palette knife again just to help me spread it because it is so kind of like clumpy. You can use caster sugar, but I think the brown sugar really nicely enhances the flavor of the tahini, and you should have a nice even spread like that. Now I'm going to take a cinnamon. I'm going to sprinkle about a tablespoon all around. And you can do the same thing again if you want. You could have mixed it with the brown sugar earlier. I did not, but if you're organized, go for it. So you're going to lift this into thirds. Oh, sorry, my arm is right in front of that. So, sorry, I'm just trying to see what you can see. Okay, 1/3, fold it over, another third, fold it over, and I like to turn it lengthways. And now I'm going to cut this into 12 pieces. So I'm going to grab a knife, cut it in half. I like to trim off the edges and break those up separately and eat them. Use a nice big knife and just cut straight through so you get nice clean cuts. Then you're going to take each piece and cut it into 3, but just keeping it attached slightly at the top, like that. So I'm going to go through and do all of those. So just 2 cuts per piece to get 3 strands. You want them to be even, but they don't have to be perfectly even. They will roll up at the sides a bit, so don't worry about that. And you have on your recipe 2 additional recipes for the cinnamon version without the tahini and the chocolate version. And so the technique is exactly the same. Now, you're going to take it. I like to let it stretch and hang so it stretches out a bit, and just plait the 3 strips together. Oh, I'm getting a bit tangled, but honestly, if you do, it's fine. Alright, we're a bit tangled there. We've got a bit of a plait, and then I take it in my hand, roll it up, and then I go over like that and kind of just tuck it all together. So you have a base and it looks pretty on the top. So I'll do that again, bit of a stretch, and then just plait it. Sorry, no, it's a bit hard to see, but it's just that typical over under plait. You can even just twist it. It really doesn't matter too much because of those layers in the strands from folding it in the 3. We're not going to keep the plait as a plait and then twisting it. Oops, and that one broke, which is fine. Just smush it together. It's just so you get to see all those different layers, and it's quite texturally interesting to look at. I'll do this one straight on there so you can see. So I like to wrap it round at least once and then tuck it under. get stuck a bit, don't worry. You can see some of them are breaking off a bit because I overstretched it or whatever, or they're coming apart because the tahini is sticky on one side and not on the other where the brown sugar is, and that's fine. If you do the cinnamon ones or the chocolate ones, they'll be more sticky on one side, so they'll on both sides, so they'll stick together a bit better. But it honestly doesn't matter for the final result. It's just about getting that layered look. You can even just twist it, and yeah, I like to just roll it around and then come across so you've got that kind of knot shape. And you can just put these straight on a tray like that if you don't have a muffin tin. I like to do them in a muffin tin to keep them kind of nicely in shape. Oh, I'm making a mess of that one, so I'm just going to twist it round. And you still get a beautiful effect. And you can see I'm really at the base just squidging them together so they hold together. Baking them in the muffin tin will help just keep them together. I'll do the same with that one. Just twist it round, twist, twist, round, pinch, tuck it all under. And they look really pretty. So this dough is really versatile. You can just bake it as a loaf. You know, you don't even have to put anything in it. It's a beautiful brioche dough on its own. You can put it in muffin tins as like a shell. So put a bit in, press down, and put inside like a pastry cream, and then some frozen berries or some bits of chocolate and a berry compote, and bake it up like that is really nice. Put in some custard in the middle and bake it. It's so good and so versatile. You can reduce the sweetness in it if you want to use it for a savory context. So just take the sugar out of it, really. There's not a lot of salt in the dough, just because there's so much stuff in there that kind of slows down the yeast rising. Also because we're using salted butter, we don't need as much salt in there because it's coming in through the butter. Or kind of muck that one up, but that's alright. Alright, last one. If you want these edge pieces that I cut off earlier, you can cut them up into little bits and put them in the base of your tins, or you could, I'll show you now, just cut a bit off, take it and put it in there when you wrap it up, and you can do that with every single one and use it up. Alright, now I'm going to take my muffin tin. I'm sorry, this one is very old, so it looks a bit ratty. Take my muffin tin, bit of canola oil spray, and just give it a spray. And then pop them all in and push down a little bit for a little nap. You want to make sure the seam or the closing bit is at the base. And then I like to give them another spray. And put some cling film on. If you don't spray them, they may stick to the cling film. If you don't have oil spray, you can just brush them with oil or butter and water on the top. Sorry, brush the tins with oil or butter and then brush oil on the top to stop them from drying out as well, and then a bit of cling film and oil the cling film if you put water on top. I'm just going to leave them until they've started to puff up and double in size, and I will show you what that looks like. Okay, bye. So it's been about an hour now and my buns have risen. They've grown. Really nicely. They've pretty much doubled in size. A really good way to test if they're ready for the oven is when you push down you should leave an indent in the dough like that. If you have done the chocolate ones or possibly the cinnamon ones, the butter also tends to firm up, so you can push in and you feel a firmness but the softness of the dough. So I try and find a nice meaty bit of dough. It's kind of hard with these smaller bits, but I'll do a bit of a close-up. There's a nice meaty bit. See, it just leaves an indent. That's perfect. If it does not leave an indent, so it bounces back, just needs a bit more time to prove. You can over prove it, which means it will collapse completely after it's baked, which is a bit scary. But that's quite hard to do with brioche, and you do have to really over prove it for it to collapse. Sometimes it comes out super airy, which is not a bad thing. But yeah, about an hour or so depending on the temperature. I have my oven preheated to 180 degrees, and I'm going to put these in for 10 minutes to start, and then I will see how they come out. Okay, so my buns have come out of the oven, and as you can see, I forgot about them slightly. I set a timer, and by set a timer I mean I put the numbers on and then didn't press start. So they normally take about, in my oven, 10 to 15 minutes. These were probably on the longer end, so closer to 15. What you're looking for is a nice golden colour like this one, which was one of my test batch ones, and nice and golden on the base. These ones are okay. This one's a little bit dark, but it's not too bad on the base. I did have them a bit higher in the oven, so they would have got a bit more singed on top. I did think about redoing them for the video, but you know what? This is real life. People burn stuff, even professionals, even me, and they're still going to be delicious. And if Ben doesn't eat them, well, that's his loss. So yeah. Make sure when you set your timer, you actually push start. It's really helpful. Highly recommend. But anyway, so these have cooled down a bit. When they first came out, I actually take them out of the tin to stop them sticking. So I leave them for about a minute just to cool down and then pull them out like that. And then I've put them back in to make it look like I just took them out of the oven. And they've cooled down enough for me to touch. So now I'm going to make the glaze. So bit of baking paper down, and here I have my teaspoon of tahini and my icing sugar, and I'm going to add a bit of water and just stir it around. Now remember, if you have made a different flavor, which is on your recipes, you can leave the tahini out. If you've made the chocolate ones, you can put a bit of cocoa powder in, you can put some vanilla. You don't have to glaze them. I just love this kind of glaze, this icing sugar glaze that goes a bit crispy. I love it on donuts, I love it on cake, I love it on bread, I love it on everything because it's pretty much just pure sugar. But we're going to make it nice and thin. Because we really want it more of a drizzle than like a thick glaze. Especially with the tahini, it has a bit of colour to it. And I want to be able to see all the layers that we've made so beautifully. There you go, I'm going to go even a touch thinner. There we go, just add the water a little bit at a time. Alright, so I'm going to take my slightly burnt buns. If you have leftover buns, you can freeze them, or you can just put them in the microwave or the toaster to help keep them fresh, or they make very good French toast if you like slice them up like that, or slice them in half and cook them on the pan. Very fancy lockdown breakfast. Alright, so I'm just going to put a spoonful on each. I might actually add a bit more water because I do like these quite runny. Oops, add. Oh. Alright, we're going to touch thin there, so I'm going to add a bit more icing sugar. story of my life, always adding just a little bit too much water and then adding too much icing sugar, then too much water, and you end up with a giant bowl of glaze. Alright, that's better. Just a nice drizzle on top like that. Cover up any burnt bits. If you don't have enough glaze, I'll have just enough. You can scrape off, see it's pooling around the edges. You can lift your buns off, put that back into a bowl and reuse that. Alright, I'm one short, but so what I'm going to do is now I'm going to take my sesame seeds, just sprinkle them on top of the ones that are finished. The glaze just helps them stick. And then I'm just going to put these to the side. And I'm just going to use my knife, cut this baking paper off. Squeeze that in like that. Wash all the glaze of my hair. And then I can finish off these two. Easy. Perfect. Few more sesame seeds. You can use black sesame if you want to make them look cool, or a mixture of white and black. And that is it. Let me place these a bit nicer. Alright, you get the idea. Your beautiful sesame buns, nice and light in colour, unlike mine. Nice thin glaze. Your sesame seeds, you can see the layers of the plat. Golden at the base. And I will cut one in half for you. If I can find a bread knife. I'm just going to use this knife. You can see that beautiful layering inside. How delicious. Anyway, so that's it. I hope you have enjoyed, or will enjoy, making and eating these sesame tahini buns. Tag me in photos on Instagram or Facebook if you make them. I would love to see. And yeah, have a wonderful lockdown. Behave yourselves. Okay, bye.